I will ask as people are joining, right, there's no need for cameras. We are, I think we're up over 120 participants in the meeting so far. So just for bandwidth reasons, if you could make sure that your cameras are off and that you stay muted. We will have time for Q&A at the end, and I believe that we have posted in the chat the link to the form where you can submit your questions for that Q&A section as we get to the end of the presentation. So with that, we'll kick things off as normal with a safety message. We'll dive into some general communications and some fiscal year 23 successes, as National Grid has just completed our fiscal year 23. And then we will dive into the complex process and go from there. And we'll finish it all off with a quick portal moment from our portal team. So as we get into the safety message, it's all around distracted driving. So, you know, just whether it's using your phone or eating or talking or, you know, trying to change the radio station, those type of things, all those little things can distract us. And especially if you're on the highway, you know, moving at 60 plus miles an hour, right, you can easily be going, you know, a football field in length every couple of seconds. So keep that in mind, right? How much ground you cover, right? Even in a short period of time. You know, here at National Grid, we travel for a number of different reasons, right? Whether it's you know, from building to building, from site to site. You know, as we cover storm duty, right? And we're driving in different types of hazards. Those are things that pop up all the time. So we are, you know, spending a lot of time in our year talking about driving safety. And, you know, distracted driving is one of the things that comes up the most, right? And how those handheld devices that we have now really impact everybody's attention span and everybody's focus on what they're doing at that moment, and just how important it is to continue to keep driving. Right, so just try to minimize those distractions, and don't be afraid to speak up, right? If you're in the car with someone else who seems to be not entirely focused, right, that's your life too that they have in their hands, and you know, you should always, you know, feel empowered to be able to speak up, right? And then especially, you know, lead by example. So I know that you know, it's been a couple of years now since I taught my daughter how to drive, but I give her a hard time about these things repeatedly. Right, about, you know, the phone and where the phone needs to be placed in the car so it doesn't distract her. You know, how important the cargo is she has in the car to me, right, and how that, you know, makes and why I stay up on it. The other thing that I've told her that I think, you know, sticks, right, is don't let someone else drive your car for you, right? You're in charge of your car, you're in charge of your actions. It is another distraction as you start to worry about what other people are doing or whether they're, you know, unhappy with what you are doing. You focus on your driving, you focus on the task at hand, and make sure that you arrive alive wherever you're headed. So please keep that in mind. So we'll dive into the core presentation now as we start to look at a couple of our, you know, general communications that we've talked about here in the past, and just want to reiterate some of those as we, you know, like I said, kick off our new fiscal year here at National Grid. So I mentioned at the very beginning, we've separated the complex interconnection process from the simplified interconnection process in these webinars. So the next webinar focused on simplified is going to take place on June 13th. So, you know, if you're here looking for conversations around the simplified process, we're not going to get into those today. We will be focused on expedited and standard and working through those, but encourage you to jump back in July to talk to the subject matter experts we have here in National Grid around the simplified process. If you need something a little bit sooner, right, we did cover the simplified process in our last meeting back in October, and you can go back and get those slides. You can go back and listen to that presentation on our knowledge pages. So, you know, a little bit old, but process hasn't shifted all that much. Once this is done, right, I mentioned we are recording it. We will post this slide deck. We will post this recording, and we will get out our sort of Q&A doc, all posted to the knowledge pages. So the link is here. We will send that out, that link out again once everything's been posted to this group. A couple other things that we talked about, requiring 24/7 access to all of the company-owned PCC equipment, right? So as we're coming out of the winter, right, it's less about, you know, keeping things plowed and removing snow, but it does come down to debris, right? Just anything that would be in the road, you know, gate access. If you do need a National Grid lock, because we will need to double lock if we do have equipment behind a gate. That's something that my team can make available to you. It's something that if you do run into the line workers out on site working, you can always ask them for something, because it's important that we maintain the 24/7 access to those type of things. That does come down to even, you know, past access roads and the larger scale equipment down to meters, right? As we are looking to get access to those meters, we just want to make sure that we have unimpeded access to all that. Right. The next one is around the 25 kW cap net metering exemption. Right. So the company hasn't implemented any changes yet, because we are still waiting for that departmental approval. But the interconnection requirements remain the same, right? It doesn't affect the threshold sizes. That is more simplified process oriented, but is worth noting here, right, that still nothing has changed in that space. As built accuracy, right, always important, but we have had sort of a rise in as-builts not matching what has been constructed out on site. So we just encourage everybody to let us know. The worst thing is to find out at the last minute, right? You're expecting interconnection site to go live, and then as we're reviewing all the documents and the paperwork, things start to not match up, either with what we've studied, what we expected, right, or the pictures that were being submitted. You know, it's best to keep those lines of communication open. We're happy to engage in those conversations. We're happy to engage our engineering team. We just want to make sure that we don't get to the very end of the process and have to stop and restart somewhere else. And then, you know, I think the entire industry is still dealing with supply chain issues, right? National Grid's no different. You know, we've been able to mitigate the majority of what we run into. If we do run into problems, they're usually short-lived. There are long lead time pieces of equipment and material that we are working through. So there may be, you know, impacts to schedule and timeline, right, that we're trying to set up, you know, upfront during the ISA process. But we've been able to get our arms around, you know, the expectations around time, trying to build that in on the front end, so at least there's no major surprises as we get into the project itself. That's not to say it's not going to happen, but it is, you know, it is something that we continue to deal with. I think the world and this industry will continue to deal with for a while. So we did want to share, as we dive into, I've mentioned a couple times here that we just ended our fiscal year here at National Grid, right? It ends at the end of March and we kick off a new fiscal year. So with that, we've, you know, sort of looked at some of our successes, right? And, you know, even though we have a lot of conversations around process, and the process doesn't always move as quickly as everybody wants it to, and we're dealing with a ton of saturation, we've still seen tremendous success year on year. So over a 12-month period from April of 22 to March of 23, National Grid interconnected 12,533 applications, right? And that's for a total of over 210 megawatts, right, for that 12-month period. Specific to the complex work, right? 652 of those for 123 megawatts. You can see the breakdown: 82 for solar, almost 42 of storage, and then another 8.5 around CHP or fuel cell oriented type interconnections. The simplified process actually, and the simplified interconnection saw, new highs. I'll definitely say it's within over the last 5 years, or compared to the last 5 years, that these were highs, but I would say that it's probably highs all time here for National Grid in Massachusetts. Seeing almost 12,000 apps, right? Interconnecting over 87 megawatts of smaller sized residential sites. So, and then again, the breakdown there is we see storage really starting to move its way into the simplified space. But we did run into a single month high of over 10 megawatts on the simplified side of things. So again, seeing massive volume moving through, right, and that all is great success for us and the industry overall. The other thing I'll bring of note here is just Massachusetts totals, right? We got over 2.1 gigawatts of DG interconnected here at National Grid in Massachusetts. Right, 1.8 of that is solar, and then we got over 200 megawatts of energy storage. Right, and interconnected. Most of it's in conjunction with the solar itself, but still a massive amount of interconnection. Again, just in National Grid territory here in Massachusetts. So I just wanted to bring up those successes. I think those are successes for us as a company, moving the work through and getting it interconnected, but also that's a success because we all play a big part, right, in progressing these projects overall, whether it's the DG community identifying the opportunities of where to build, right, and then working through the construction of those sites, which we know is not easy, right, and has a number of moving parts in every single one of those. So, every project that we get connected is a success, right? And we just wanted to bring those numbers here to the broader team and celebrate the success together. So I think that's it for my slides. I will hand it over to JJ to start talking about screening as we get into the process portion of this presentation. I'll reiterate a couple of things. Please stay on mute. There's no need for cameras. And we submitted the form through the chat that you can add your questions in. And we will get to those questions here at the end of the presentation. But JJ, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Quick mic check.
You're good to go.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be covering the screening team and screening review processes with everyone this morning. The screening team for all expedited and complex projects covers, runs through the pre-application for all standard track projects, 250 kW or larger, and then all application and screening processes for all the remaining of the projects. Next slide, please. Jamie, next slide. Sorry, go back a slide. There's a delay on my end. Thank you. So for all standard track projects, they all require pre-application, 250 kW or larger. When submitting a pre-application, there are 4 minimal requirements for us to be able to determine where it's going to interconnect on our system. And the 4 things that we need are the project site location, the aggregate system size, the generation type, and then like an uploaded screenshot of the area that the project is going to be planning on interconnecting to. Pre-application reports have a 10-day tariff timeframe to be turned around, and then the pre-application provides feeder circuit information, substation name, the phases near the site location, if an area is in a network or non-network area, any potential system constraints, the application review checklist, the connected and pending aggregate DG on feeders, and then any kind of issues that a project in a certain area for studies that if there's an ongoing ASO or group study area. Next slide, please. This is what a pre-application report looks like. The first page is where all of the information that I just went over in the last slide is included. And again, that's like all of the minimal circuit information for that area, aggregate DG, substation. On the second page, it details the additional notes about distribution system in the area. So this can include any of the system constraints, any ongoing ASO or group studies, if the proposed system is in a challenging area, and then all the important information that will help developers, stakeholders make a better decision in moving forward to the application stage. Next slide, please. Page 3 of the pre-app report has a bunch of useful links. It's got our ESB standard links for review of any kind of system configurations or electrical technical information. When applying for interconnection, like this page, it covers the tariff. We have the hosting capacity link on here, and there's like a bunch of useful things on here. Next slide, please. The last 3 pages of the pre-application report include the application checklist, which is a little blurry on the screen, but when you get it in the PDF form of the pre-application report, it details what documents are required and where you can find them in the tariff or in the ESB standards for what size system that you're proposing to have interconnected. It's pretty detailed out. By following this checklist, it can prevent any holds moving forward. Next slide, please. Once you've received the pre-application report and it's been reviewed and accepted, you can then follow by progressing to the application process. Applications are required for all projects. They are also required to be completed within 10 business days. All submissions require a complete application form, application fee, billing account number, system size, any assets that are going to be part of the system, the account location, a site plan, an electrical PE stamp 1 line, site control documentation, tech sheets for any equipment that's going to be utilized for the system, and then a legal information document. For any of the larger projects, we're going to require additional forms. Some of them could be like any curtailment or derating letter, anti-islanding forms, UL certificate, LRV letter, energy storage narrative. All these documents and everything that's required is detailed on that app review checklist. Slide, please. Here are some of the most commonly missed details during the application review process that typically leads to holds. Any document discrepancies between what's submitted in the portal, the system size, an asset that isn't what's listed on the application, or account numbers not matching on the legal information form to the application, or any kind of those discrepancies will always get a project placed on hold. Missing billing account numbers, not having a construction work request for all projects, missing UL certificates, missing anti-islanding forms, derating letters for equipment that needs to be derated to meet a certain system size. On 1 lines, we require all inverter and interrupting device nameplate ratings, relay settings, make, model, and voltage, and current ratings of all equipment or of all the inverters and relaying devices. The PE stamp needs to be on all 1 lines, aggregate ratings. And then on site plans, we typically see a lot of, not properly labeling the demarcation point or the PCC, company proposed equipment or existing equipment so that we have a good relative sense of how we're going to feed the site or how the site is going to backfeed onto the grid. And then additional notes like the access road notes that require at least 20 feet of clearance. And then we've required having a nice note on all of our 1 lines and site plans saying that all equipment is going to be required to be grouped and will need to be approved by National Grid before installation. That's to prevent any issues with systems being built and there's existing metering inside or existing metering on a different part of the building, where we would like the metering department to make sure that they're okay with the grouping and the installation of the system wherever it's going to be on site. Next slide, please. So these are some of the guidelines for applications and for system configurations. Like the company will not provide transformers larger than 300 kVA, or when primary metering is the least cost to serve option. All commercial meters and disconnects need to be grouped together. Existing metering located on pad mounted transformers need to be relocated when applying for standalone systems. Any smart meter installations requiring disconnecting means on both the line and load side of the meter. MA smart systems over half a megawatt need to be co-located with energy storage system to meet requirements. All final metering locations will be determined by the metering department, and they're going to be based upon existing service configuration. Again, depends. If you have a meter room inside a very large building, most likely we're going to want the PV meter probably located with the rest of the meters in the meter room, or the disconnect located outside, but it's going to be dependent on site. So going to require National Grid metering to sign off. All expedited cases that require further study are going to require all the documentation required for any standard track projects. And then the final disconnect and metering locations, again, cannot be installed, should not be installed until National Grid has approved the location on site with the installer electrician. Slide, please. So once the application is finalized and all the documents have been approved, it then progresses to screening, where it's required for all expedited and standard projects. The screening review is going to determine if a project can interconnect without requiring a detailed study for non-standard projects and the expedited path review under 250 kW. For any projects larger than 250 kW, they're going to typically always require further study. The screening review is going to take a detailed look at the proposed system configurations and area infrastructure to provide corrections or feedback to developers before progressing that project for further study. During screening, we also check if the project's like on a radial network system, all UL 1741 SB listed equipment. If that DG system is going to pass substation backing and non-ending screens, and then any projects larger than 25 kW on 4 kV feeders are also subject to additional study, just due to the complexity and the capacity limitations on those feeders. Most 4 kV interconnections do require further study. Next slide, please. So these are some potential system constraints that lead to further study. Any ongoing area studies or group studies, challenging feeders, hosting capacity, feeder reconfiguration, any ungrounded or non-effectively grounded feeders in HT lines. If there's planned substation work, there's feeder, saturation, and then the DG penetration levels of the system. These are all most common reasons why most projects are now being sent for additional study. And then the saturation levels, obviously, as we continue to interconnect all the projects that we've been seeing and all the applications that we get, continue to get more and more saturated. Next slide, please. So this is a finalized screening memo that kind of outlines everything that everything for like a project configuration, all the site and information data. Right at the beginning, we have if it's determined if a study is required or not. If the project can progress to an individual impact study, there's going to be a cost right there on that first page. The proposed feeder and substation information will also be on that first page. And then the second page, next slide, please, is going to lay out all the utility and site equipment layout notes, general site requirement notes, any additional information that you're going to need moving forward, including like possible PSCAD modeling, things like that. And then the screening review notes that go over, what we did in the screening. Next slide, please. This page outlines the equipment that's going to be proposed to be utilized for the project, and then additional like UL certification notes and PCC notes on that final page. Next slide, please. We'll have some references and links once the screening is finalized and provided for where you can find any of the information that was screened. That's pretty much it for the screening process. I'm going to kick this off to Mr. Ron Allen to go over the expedited and standard processes.
Thank you, and I assume you can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have the next slide, please, Jamie. I'm going to first go over the expedited process. Expedited criteria is single-phase customers with listed single-phase inverter-based system with power ratings of greater than 15 kW on a radial feed. Three-phase customers with listed three-phase inverter-based systems with power ratings of more than 25 kW on a radial feed. Any projects that did not pass a simplified process screens, non-simplified projects that do not require an impact study. Maximum size supplemental review is based on review of screens. It must be using DPU 1468 forms when submitting application and closeout packages. Next slide, please. Here's the interconnection process steps. You have the pre-application, the expedited application, engineering review, supplemental review if required, the ISA, company construction, the witness tests, if applicable, completion document review and meter set, and then ATI. Next slide, please. And here's the expedited review path. So up to 3 business days, we acknowledge the receipt of the application. 10 days is review the application for completeness. 25 days complete review of all screens. 20 days or standard process complete supplemental review. 10 days send executable agreement. And the total maximum number of days is 45 to 65. And the construction schedule varies, based on the work that we need to do. And then within 10 days of receiving the certificate of completion, we schedule the witness test. Next slide, please. Now, common errors in application packages. The legal information document needs to be completely filled out with all required information. The one-line diagram is required to have a PE stamp. If a battery is included in the project, ensure application reflects this equipment. Make sure storage, charging, discharging capability is noted on the one line. When case status is conditional approval, delivered, pending customer decision, don't hit the finalize submission button until you have uploaded your signed ISA. Next slide, please. So the next 3 slides are common errors in completion documents. Excuse me. For most expedited applications, a commissioning memo on a company letterhead is provided in lieu of a witness test. Commissioning test should consist of at least the following: 2-second shutdown when disconnect open test, 5 minutes before restart when disconnect is closed test, confirm system matches as built, list the inverter, relay frequency, and trip time settings. Next slide, please. The as-built must be PE stamped and signed and dated by the person that performed the commissioning test. Meter pictures should show a permanent plaque that includes a warning about generator installed, and also pictures if the AC utility disconnect switch is not grouped with and adjacent to the utility revenue meter, then a permanent plaque that clearly identifies the location of the AC utility disconnect is required. Next slide, please. Evidence of insurance is required for expedited and standard projects, except for eligible Class 1 net metering facilities. Please refer to ISA and tariff for insurance requirements. And Schedule A is required. Schedule A's are required for all QF projects. W-9, ACH form, supplier enrollment form, and asset registration are needed for projects over 60 kW. Next slide, please. These are metering reminders. No equipment between the meter and the socket or in a meter socket. Meter sockets are not allowed to be used as junction boxes. Projects greater than 60 kW in Massachusetts require interval metering, either wireless or phone line. Make sure a test meter is removed from generation meter socket. A company needs a 4G wireless signal test on a Verizon network in order to provide wireless metering. Phone lines must be dedicated and terminated at the meter location. Lines must be 100% copper. Fiber lines will not communicate properly. These meters are long lead time items and and prep time can be 10 to 12 weeks. So it's important to work through this with your job owner well in advance of when you intend to seek ATI. And this is the form for the wireless meter test at the bottom. Next screen, please. And now I'm going to go over the standard review process. So the standard criteria is at least greater than 500 kW, may require an impact study, may require substation system modifications, non-listed inverters or generators other than PV, induction, synchronous or asynchronous, most CHP systems, and any project that did not qualify for the simplified or expedited process. Next screen, please. So here's the interconnection process steps. We have the pre-application, the standard application, the engineering review, impact study, and if need be, the detailed study, the ISA, we have design, pre-construction requirements, company construction, witness test and completion documents and photos, meter installation, registering of the asset, and then finally ATI. Next screen, please. And here's the standard review path. Acknowledge receipt of the application up to 3 business days. Review application for completeness, 10 days. Complete standard process initial review, 20 days. Send the impact study agreement, 5 days. The complete impact study is 55 to 60 days. Complete detailed study, if needed, is 30 to 60 days. Send the ISA, 15 days, and total maximum number of days is either 135, 160 days if it begins as expedited, and 200 days or more if standard complex. And then the construction schedule, it does vary based on the work that's needed. And then the witness test is 10 days from the company approved for the witness test procedure and all the documents. Next slide, please. Standard review path reminders. The impact study and detailed study will determine the electrical impact on the company's EPS with the required system modifications and associated costs. All projects greater than 1 megawatt will require ISO New England 1.3.9 submission for ISO New England approval, regardless of whether an ASO study is required. The submission will take place within the impact study. Once submitted, the impact study will be placed on an ASO hold until the ISO New England provides approval and/or the ASO study is complete. If substation modifications are required, company has 60 business days for study. If estimated construction costs are greater than $1 million, study timelines could be by mutual agreement, notified at the 20 business day review. The ISA will have the estimated construction timeline is provided after study is complete. If detailed study is required, the customer may request an early ISA, which will not have a construction timeline. For Mass DPU number 1468, first kayak payment is due within 60 business days, and kayak payments no longer have the 30 business day cure period. Failure to make timely payments will result in application withdrawal. And design begins after the first kayak payment is received, and easements, permitting, right of way begin after design and are required to move the project into construction. Next screen, please. Witness test and completion document reminders. Documents can be approved in advance, but all must be provided before review can begin. For all specified questions, please reach out to your account manager. The witness test checklist include pictures of nameplates. All checklist requirements must be approved in both National Grid and customer construction must be completed prior to the scheduling the witness test. The completion documents checklist. Asset registration are required as part of compliance documents. National Grid applies for asset registration on behalf of the customer. Typically takes 5 to 10 business days. All incentive projects greater than 60 kW require asset registration with ISO before ATI is granted because we cannot backdate QF or net metering payments. Behind the meter class 2 and 3 net metering and demand response systems are exempt from being registered as a settlement only generator with ISO. If AC battery standalone system is generating power to the grid, needs to be registered separately with the ISO. Next slide, please. Document revision and restudy reminders. Whenever new one lines or site plans are submitted, all changes should be clouded and the revision block should be updated. One lines and site plans need to have the PE stamp as per ESB 756. If making changes after study has been finalized, the customer needs to inform National Grid of changes via change request button on the portal and provide revised documents to determine if restudy would be necessary. Restudy will have associated study costs and timelines. Restudies can cause impacts to project costs and timelines, even if the scope of work does not change. Please refer to the moderate significant change guidance prior to submitting a change. If an ISA has already been executed, the company design construction process may be put on hold for the duration of the restudy and until an ISA amendment has been fully executed. Reevaluation of the construction schedule may be necessary and will be determined after full execution of the respective amendment. Next screen, please. So the next two slides are important target dates for customers requesting end of year interconnection. And by October 1st, please submit the following documentation: proposed witness test procedure and energization plan, any additional witness test documents that are available, wireless meter test form or phone line numbers as applicable if you're putting in a POTS line. By November 15th, complete distributed generation facility construction, and also by the 15th of November, submit all outstanding documentation. And next screen, please. Meeting these target dates does not guarantee end of year interconnection for your facility. However, it does give the company a better opportunity to meet your request. These target dates have been established based on the company's experience with delays to end of year processing, including necessary engineering review of initial plans and documentation, as well as multiple subsequent reviews and documentations with interconnecting customer as necessary to achieve the interconnecting customer's compliance with the requirements. Queuing and resource allocation for both witness testing, scheduling, and meter installations. Fewer processing days due to state holidays and weather conditions. Required registration with ISO New England for projects over 1 megawatt that must be processed prior to ATI and interconnecting customer delays and starting the registration process in a timely manner. The interconnecting customers planning and cooperation is essential to this process. Please keep in mind that the company will not issue ATI until the interconnecting customer has satisfied all interconnection requirements and the required company meter is installed. Next screen, please. So here's just a quick group summary, group study summary. We had each group member is encouraged to review the group study provisions to understand the full scope of the process and requirements for the group study process. The company will provide visibility and communication in accordance with the tariff. Group members are responsible to understand individual responsibilities and process tasks that require group consensus. Next screen, please. And this is just a snapshot of group study timelines. Snapshot of group study timelines is depicted here. We have up to 40 business days for the group window. The group window is intended to collect applications submitted within the common study area. Next screen, please. We do pause and deliver a preliminary assessment, which is intended to be a similar conversation to the 20 business day review and a regular impact study. And the next screen, please. And this is just the group study reference. So we have group study forms and resources, change request form, extension requests, and you're able to click on the links here to get additional information. That concludes my presentation. I'll be passing this over to Shauna.
Thank you, Ron. I wanted to also add that during the first 3 months of authority to interconnect, customers should continue to use the chatter on the application case for questions about first bill setup, final SOQ, and initial allocations, and any immediate technical issues that were not caught during the witness test. Next slide, please. Okay, what is DER customer support? As part of the Customer Energy Integration Department, our vision is to make it as easy to be a customer with connected distributed energy resources as it is to be a traditional National Grid customer. Our purpose is to prepare National Grid for a time when more than half of our customers have DER equipment or participate in a DER incentive program. Our goals for customer portal support is managing and improving user experience in the National Grid customer application portal, and for our connected customer support, managing and improving business processes, communications, and customer requests for National Grid customers hosting connected DER equipment or participating in a DER incentive program. Next slide, please. Okay, who can submit connected customer requests? The system owner, the host customer, and other parties designated by the system owner and/or host customer in writing. How do I know if my project is connected? Just because the panels are on the roof doesn't mean the project is connected. If your application case has received authority to interconnect and all of the following that apply, the project has been fully registered, if required, with ISO New England, a first bill on the host account with net metering or smart AOBC credits that were correctly allocated to all satellite billing accounts per the initial request. The refund or invoice for reconciling system modification costs has been paid. And after all of the above criteria are met, support would be handled by the DER connected customer group. The exception is if you are replacing or adding equipment to your site, you need to submit a new application with the existing equipment clearly marked on the line diagram. Next slide. All right, submitting a DG inquiry. Check the post interconnection pages for information about your question request. Click Contact Us to open a DG inquiry form. Provide all available information, including attachments, and click Submit. Receive an email confirming submission, and National Grid will process your request and/or answer your question. Next slide, please. Okay, and where to find allocation change forms, go to ngus.forest.com, and then you want to click on Post Interconnection. Next slide, please. Where to find allocation change forms, click on Massachusetts Post Interconnection and click on Massachusetts Credit Allocation Change Request or Inquiry. Next slide. Credit allocation change requests for net metering simple residential, please submit the Schedule Z form and please submit the one-time transfer form. For net metering complex, please submit the Schedule Z form and the Schedule Z Excel. The one-time transfer form, account removal form, or please process the swap form. For a Mass Smart net metered, please submit the Schedule Z form and the Schedule Z Excel. For Mass Smart Alternative on Bill Credit, also known as AOBC, please submit the AOBC form. And Schedule Z and AOBC allocation changes can be submitted 4 times per calendar year. Next slide, please. Schedule Z versus one-time transfer request. A Schedule Z can be updated 4 times per calendar year. To change the allocation of excess generation credits on your account, requests are made as percentage, which will be based on the generation per month. Please be sure to choose how you would like your net metering credits allocated by selecting one of the options in section E. On page 3 is where you will be providing your designation by percentage allocation. Page 4, a signature and date are required. For the one-time transfer request, this is used to transfer excess credit balance from your account to another account or multiple accounts on a one-time basis. This must meet the mass load zone requirements and be transferred to a National Grid electric account. The request needs to be made in dollar amounts versus a percentage up to the amount that is available at the time of processing as an excess credit. And a signature and date are required. Next slide, please. And these are some of the drop-down menu topics. We've got DG billing inquiry, credit allocation inquiry, transfer of ownership, power quality high voltage, credit allocation change requests, other post interconnection inquiry, and system terminated decommissioned. And I will hand it over to Kara for our portal moment.
Great. Thank you so much. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me.
Yes.
All right, awesome. So I just wanted to go over a little bit of how you can find some cases if you are looking in the portal and you're not seeing a case that you know you've been added to, or maybe you have a team member that you've added and they're not seeing that case. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is in this main view form here, you're going to want to click on this little triangle arrow down pointing, and that's going to pop up a drop down for you. Next slide, please. And from there, you should see several options. All my company's DG applications will show you any applications that have been input by anybody within your company. So if you know that you've been added, or maybe you thought you were added to the application roles, but you're not seeing the application, you still can find that specific application case number by looking at all my company's DG applications. And we recommend that if that works for you and you're able to find the cases that you need, that you go ahead and pin that so that you can find that easily. One quick thing to note is sometimes all my company's DG applications will be above all of my DG applications, and other times it may be farther down the list in the all other lists section. So just make sure you scroll both up and down when you are looking for that option. And that is all for the portal moment. So I will hand it over to Will now.
Hey, thank you, Kara. Thanks, everybody. So we will shift gears into the Q&A piece of this now. So we do have a number of questions already submitted. If you do have additional questions, please use that form and submit those questions. So we'll work here over the next 20, 25 minutes or so to get as many of these as we can answered. And anything we don't get answered, we will be posting here within the next couple of weeks a Q&A doc that will be available for you, that will address all the questions that we received. So some of these questions may not pertain directly to the topics discussed today. We may address some of those offline directly with the person who submitted them. So I do encourage, when you do submit a question, that you put your contact email back there so we can engage you directly and go from there. But with that, we got a whole bunch, and I'll start working through them right now. So the first one I'll take, there was a question around that 25 kW cap net metering adoption. Looking at a estimated time of completion from the DPU and whether that will be retroactive. And we actually don't have answers to either of those questions, right? It's entirely DPU driven at this point. We don't know what their timeline is. We do know that they're working through a number of different topics. I'm not sure where that falls on their overall priority list. So they'll eventually get to that point and make those decisions and then provide direction that National Grid will follow. One of those pieces, or one of those directions, I believe, will be about whether this will be retroactive or not. So depending on what the DPU decides, right, National Grid will follow suit. But at this time, we don't know if it will be retroactive, and we don't know when decisions will ultimately be made. JJ, I'm going to put you on the spot on this one. It says for the applications and submitting interconnection through National Grid, can we sign applications as a business, or does it need to be a person?
Sure. So applications can be signed by, or they need to be signed by the interconnecting customer. So if the interconnecting customer happens to be a business, that business can have their contact person or the case owner for that project in the portal be the signatory on the application form or legal information form.
Thank you. All right, Mike, we got, I think, a more of a technical question here, so I'm going to put you on the spot. But the question is, why won't National Grid allow new DG customers to interconnect with revenue grade 0 export controllers? This is a perfect solution to areas in the group study or ASO study areas.
Yeah, thank you, Will. So in our ESB 756, there is a section that addresses these controllers. So any projects that qualify for the simplified application projects are allowed to use those controllers. There's more detail in the ESB in section 7.6.13 that says what we would look for from the controller. But for simplified applications, we are allowing them to be able to manage export. And through our grid mod track 2 investments, which got approved last November, we're also pursuing other demonstration projects so we can see what other functionality we can be able to leverage out of these controllers and see what we can offer for the non-simplified applications. As it stands today, any non-simplified interconnection can still employ power limiting. However, it has to be through a utility grade relay and not through a power control system at this time.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So Shauna, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'll read this question real quick, but it's can a business name be the customer on a bill?
Yes, so commercial customers can contact our call center to set up their billing account, and the name of the business would be listed as the customer of record on the bill. But billing customers should set up their account with the correct business or residential name prior to submitting the initial application to connect. Great,
thank you. I'm going to take the next couple here. So we have a question about when is a Schedule B required? So Schedule B is not required in Massachusetts. That is a Rhode Island specific task at this point. So anything that would be Massachusetts specific would not involve a Schedule B. Another quick hitter, it says, what is the process for requesting raw data from service meters and smart meters? So you would submit a DG inquiry case. I think we've talked a little bit about that through a few of these slides here, but if you submit that in inquiry through the portal, right, we have a team that monitors those questions and would be able to address those questions and get back to you. So that would go through the portal. Mike, I'm going to throw two at you right here, sort of in quick succession. One of them is, please explain DG penetration. And then maybe a little bit more is, does a recloser requirement start at 500 kW or above 500 kW?
Yeah, thanks. So for the first one, DG penetration, so that at a high level, it's referring to the amount of DG that we actually have interconnected to the system. So, high penetration levels would mean there's a high amount of megawatts interconnected to that portion of the grid, whether it be the feeder, the substation level, or an entire, area of our service territory. Another term you might hear kind of paired up with that is DG saturation. It's the same type of concept. It's just referring to, saturation meaning full. It's referring to the really maximum kind of high level megawatts connected to that part of the system. So those are two terms you might hear kind of paired together, but that's generally what they mean. For the second question, does a recloser requirement start at 500 kW or above 500 kW? So right now, our requirement in the ESB is for a customer-owned interrupting device. So that can be a recloser, it can be a breaker, it just has to be a automated interrupting device for the purpose of detecting faults. That starts at sites that are greater than or equal to 500 kW. Now, I'm not sure which way the question was framed, but that's the customer side device, customer owned, that we review as part of the interconnection process. There also are requirements for national grid owned reclosers at the point of service that's feeding your site. So for any site that's greater than or equal to a megawatt, it's absolutely required. That's for protection and also for monitoring and control of the site. But there are additional requirements where if you're below 1 megawatt, during the course of study for your project, a risk of islanding analysis is conducted. And if within that, it's determined that your site poses a risk of islanding, even if you're below 1 megawatt, you may be required to have a national grid recloser to be able to protect the system in interconnecting your site. And the requirements for the risk of islanding portion are pretty detailed. It has to do with the ratio of load to DG at your point of interconnection, and also the mix of types of generation that's on that particular feeder and substation. And that can be found in our ESB under section 7.6.12.2. And we'll have those numbers posted for you, but that's where you can get more detail there on that particular requirement.
Great, thank you, Mike. Good clarification just came in around the Rhode Island piece of it. So I should have mentioned that Rhode Island, though at one point was part of National Grid, is no longer a National Grid entity. They have moved over to PPL, so Rhode Island Energy is standalone. So any work to be done in Rhode Island does not have any ties to National Grid any longer at this point. So one clarification there. JJ, put you back on the spot here real quick. It says, is the supplemental review always required in an expedited process?
No. So when we progress an expedited project to supplemental review, it's typically due to the complexities of that project. So any projects that require an easement, some kind of petition where we have to talk to the town, any type of underground construction, even if it's a pad mounted replacement, anytime we have any kind of primary line extensions, there's just too many obstacles for us to be able to determine how to progress. So we need distribution design to physically inspect, confirm, and design the project before we can progress into conditional approval. And those are the types of projects that go to supplemental review.
Okay, great, thank you. Shauna, I'm going to put you back on the spot real quick here. It says, regarding the inquiry submissions, case numbers get applied to those submissions, but for some reason we can't search those case numbers in the portal. Are we just looking in the wrong place? I'd assume that since it's a case number, the record would show up on a case list for our company records.
Yeah, I would just suggest making sure you're logged in at the time of submitting the inquiry case. And then the case, should be available when you log in, and you should be able to search or review it in your list of cases.
Thank you. All right, there is a question here, right? It's generator size limit for large non-exporting interconnections to 69 kV or 115 kV. Designed to offset load. So that's not my wheelhouse here, right? We're focused on the distribution level interconnections. So we don't have the appropriate subject matter experts to be talking about transmission level interconnections and sort of the ISO interconnection rules around that. So no answer from this group for that question. Let's see. So, and I'll take another one real quick. It says, recalling conversations suggesting that load zone requirements for credit allocations were going to be reviewed. under the new DPU legislation, do we have an update on when that might be finalized? And the quick answer is no. Right, so the DPU, as I mentioned earlier, is still working through a number of things. I'm sure this is on their priority list somewhere, but we do not have visibility as to a timeline for that to be completed. So no real answer from us on that. Let me see. So Mike, real quick, are all of your 4 kV feeders ungrounded only at the substation?
No, so I mean, there could be a couple outliers out there where we have them as ungrounded and are at actually 2400 volts instead of the 4 kV. But the majority of the 4 kV class 3-phase feeders on our system, they are effectively grounded across the feeder line. That does mean that any interconnecting projects are subject to the requirements of effective grounding within the ESB, but they are not all ungrounded.
Thank you. And then a quick follow-up just popped in around the inquiry cases. So we do have your email address here submitted as part of it. So so Shauna will reach out directly and work with you to try to figure out what's going on with that one. So JJ, you're up next. It says, is a 3-line diagram not needed for applications and a single line diagram adequate?
Yes. So we don't need 3-line diagrams. 3-line diagrams are, fully accepted. They're fine, but we only do require single lines.
Great. Thank you. So question just popped up. So we did receive all the questions. So there were some questions that were submitted prior to the meeting start. There were a number of questions there. So what we're going to do is we're going to all by the same person who submitted them. We're going to reach out directly to that person, right, and talk through either via email response or right, we weren't going to try to dive into each one of those questions here. So if you do submit a question, like I said, we'll either respond directly back if you provide a contact. We'll respond directly back if we don't attack those questions here as part of the webinar, but we will definitely follow up. So one other question. Not sure who the right person to put on the spot is, but I'm going to read the question and to my team here, right? Anyone who I think is the right person, if you could speak up. But it says that we're being asked by the DG case owner to obtain a work request number for potential system upgrades to be added to the application, but having trouble getting those created when calling the work request line. And then, so just wondering how to proceed if we can't get the work request created, and then meanwhile apps are on hold and not progressing because of this confusion between departments, what should the developer be doing? So I don't know who's the best person to answer.
I can take that. Well, yeah, so to progress any applications, especially anything in the standard track, we require that work request to move forward for any potential system mods for metering, for all of that stuff. So right now we are having a knowledge sharing session with the work request group, and how to be able to properly communicate it to them, how to obtain those work requests. In the meantime, you can reach out directly to me via chat or email for those that are having an issue obtaining those work requests. We are working closely with that team right now to kind of avoid those issues moving forward.
Hey, Will, this is Sean Diamond. I'll also add, I know last week specifically, there were some IT issues that were preventing the creation of new work requests. So if you did submit a request last week, I would follow up again this week. I believe those IT issues have been resolved internally at National Grid. So that should help get things moving again.
Thank you both. So I think what we'll also do is we'll take a note down here, right? If that process is not working as smooth as it, maybe should, or we would all hope it would, maybe we'll take a takeaway here to address it in one of our future webinars and kind of talk through the steps of that process. So we'll take that note down as a team. We'll dive into the process a little bit more, and we'll see if we can bring some insight to the broader group here around the work request creation process. So couple more are coming in. So Mike, this one is there non-export generator size limit for distributed or distribution interconnection?
Yeah, so at this time, there is not a limit on size for an individual project looking to connect to the distribution system. However, there is, we mentioned penetration and saturation earlier. There is high saturation across our entire service territory. So larger size sites, although they're not expressly prohibited right now from entering an application of whatever size is deemed necessary, the larger the site, the more likely you are to find it's in a situation requiring more extensive system modifications or more extensive study, for example, in the form of like group study or something like that. So there's no prohibition right now, but the larger size sites can still find certain challenges to be able to move forward.
And then I'll keep you on here, Mike. If there is not an ASO study required, are there distribution impact study scenarios that require PSCAD modeling?
So right now, for any sites that are 1 megawatt and larger, there is a requirement for the PSCAD models, which can be used by certain portions of the distribution analysis, but it's also noting that all sites 1 megawatt or greater are subject to ISO and transmission study and review if deemed necessary during the course of the study. So PSCAD models are being requested for anything over 1 megawatt. In terms of the distribution analysis, if you are below 1 megawatt, PSCAD, it's expected that transmission analyses won't be required. You're in a distribution only analysis type of scenario, and PSCAD models would not be required for projects below 1 megawatt.
Okay. So Jen Chalifo, I think you're on the call, so I think I'm gonna put you on the spot because we got a couple of group study questions here. So I'll dive. So the first one is, what is the process for changing equipment after a project has progressed through a group study and or ASO study? Our nameplate system size would be exactly the same. The only change would be different equipment.
Good morning, everybody. So in-kind equipment changes are allowable under the group study tariff. I would recommend you maybe reference the tariff for the definition of in-kind equipment change, but they are allowable without group consent. So if you do have a need to modify the equipment you're using on site, and it is not going to impact the operating characteristics of your system, then you can go ahead and submit the one-line update. Please chatter on your case. And your job owner will address those one lines and socialize them with our engineering team to confirm the changes are in fact in kind and allowable without unanimous consent.
All right, Jen, I'm going to keep you here too, because I think this one is related to group study, even though it doesn't mention group study specifically, but it says, will National Grid true up study costs at the completion of the studies, or will a true up only be allowed after PTO? In this case, would be permission to operate. So I think there may be a group study answer and a traditional study answer.
Yep, so per the tariff, reconciliation occurs after PTO. And there's a reason for that, right? We don't have all of the associated costs identified immediately following the conclusion of the study effort. And there is always the opportunity to have additional study dollars and or changes allocated to the original study cost. I mean, we do make a concerted effort to make sure we're utilizing the dollars paid at the start of the study, to the fullest extent before asking to collect more. Sometimes it's not possible, but we do make that effort in every case. So per the tariff, reconciliations occur predominantly after PTO.
All right, so we got one more here. So I'll read the question real quick, but I think it may involve us posting a link in the chat here. But it says, how do you add an asset on the portal? I received an inquiry stating that I need to add an inverter. So I think if we could just add this link to knowledge page here on the portal. Share that with the group, so that I think try that out, or try that page. If you still got questions, then you can submit an inquiry to get someone, or work with a job owner that you may already have a project with. Okay. So we got one more. I'll go one more question here. It just popped up, but it says, given that we can now increasingly face a hold of over a year, it's more likely that we need to change equipment. Please. Okay, I don't think there's a specific question here for us to answer. But I think we are I think the question or the topic here is more around changes that need to be made to a project over time, right? Because this process, right, can take a while to work its way through based on where we are in the state saturation wise. And there are in-kind changes. I think Jen mentioned, right, that we've done our best to identify, what in-kind changes would look like, in addition to a significant and moderate change document that we put out there identifying examples of changes. So, we do understand that things, right, equipment becomes unavailable over time, that manufacturers make changes, no longer support different pieces of equipment. So we do understand that that does happen over time, and we have tried to include in our processes overall, right, to make sure that, we can understand what those changes are, not start our project over, right, from the beginning, if that's the situation. But there are scenarios in which, right, significant change does happen to a project, and that's when we have to put that project back through a different process. So, but we are aware of those changes, and we've done our best internally to make sure that we can continue the process even when those changes do pop up, especially in-kind changes. So with that is the last question that we have here. As usual, we will leave this open here for the rest of the day, right? If there are other questions, please feel free to submit those questions. We'll take them back as a team. We'll make sure that we write up cohesive answers and be able to post that in the same place as we will the recording and the slide deck. Those should be up today, if not tomorrow morning. The Q&A doc does take a little while for us to prep and get those answers down before we can post that also. So it usually comes a couple of weeks, after we post the slide deck itself. So appreciate everybody joining us here in a beautiful northeast day, and wish everybody a great rest of the week and a weekend here with the great weather. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.